Welcome to Ask Me Anything series by Pragmatic Leaders. We're glad to see you all here. So, before we start today's session, I would like to give you all a little brief about Pragmatic Leaders. At Pragmatic Leaders, you are a part of global family of aspirational professionals who proactively help each other and are invested in each other's career's growth. So, Pragmatic Leaders functions like a full stack global career accelerator that rests on three core pillars. Pillar 1 is educate. We help you upskill via our proven courses and professional industry coaches. Pillar 2 is engage. We run a global community of product managers on Slack with access to online and offline meetups. Pillar 3 is employ, where we operate a job platform is to help you crack your dream job. So I'll share link of all these channels after this session with you. So with that note, let's begin.
Oh yeah, definitely. Everyone has sent me more questions than I can possibly answer within an hour. So I've been trying to deduplicate some of them, and I'll try to cover as many as possible. But there's a lot of great questions here.
So let's begin with the session, and you can take the session forward.
All right, perfect. I'm probably going to cover the first question I'm going to ask is, like, there was something that came up quite a bit. For a software developer, what's the path to becoming a product manager? And then, the same question came back as a product designer. What was the path to becoming a product manager? For a business person, what's the path to becoming a product manager? So that question came back from all different roles. And I don't think there's necessarily a perfect answer, but you can ultimately come from any one of these. At Mozilla, I guess my background is more business, and I've worked in startups. I've tried to build my own startups, whether that be successfully or not. But other product managers have been engineers, others have been designers. So there's really no one path to become a product manager. I think what becomes the common trait is that everyone tends to be a little bit T-shaped. What that means is you're usually not a specialist. So I'm very tech savvy, I'm very data driven. And even if I'm a business person, whereas some of the engineers, I think they always, in their roles, we're not looking about how to make things, but we're very curious about why are they building them, what impact can they have. I think engineers have a tendency of just building and shipping and starting the next thing. An engineer that might be suited for product management will care about why they're building this and what impact it's going to have, and they'll be curious about the metrics once it ships. They won't assume that they know exactly the right way to build it. I think that's a similar mindset for UX. So I think it's really about developing a suite of skills, not being a specialist, but it's a way for you to also position yourself in the market differently. I have to play on my strengths. I'm not going to go after the most technical product management roles when some of my colleagues, for example, are extremely technical engineers as a background while being product managers. I'll focus on roles that are more UX and data driven, and that are essential for driving growth, because I have more of a background growing startups and experimentation, A/B testing. So I hope it's hard to answer all of these, but as a good start, it's showing up to events like this. Continue to read. There's no harm in trying to build your own products with friends, whether they succeed or not. Just getting that experience is very valuable. And I think I kind of stumbled into becoming a product manager because every startup I worked in, every startup I started, I was the one who wasn't an engineer. And I just slowly took on that role of product manager. But I suspect that in any team that you work on, if there's no product manager, try to fill those shoes, get that experience. It's really about practice. So that's like a high level answer. I'm not going to go into everything that's required to becoming a product manager, but it's just hopefully I can give you some hope that it doesn't matter what your background is. When we hire, we don't look for a specific diploma. We look for experience. One of the questions: how do I get into Mozilla as a PM with only internship level experience? I think that would be really difficult, but given that we're open source, there is a way to contribute, even if you have only internship level experience. And that could mean helping us write PRDs, feature documents. It could mean helping us identify opportunities in the market and documenting them. So there's definitely ways to contribute, but Mozilla tends to want to hire very, very senior people. And the reason being is we're a lot of product managers, and in order to make it manageable, everyone needs to be very self-sufficient and autonomous. Like they can't afford to handhold us in any way. So for I know our hiring strategy is to really hire senior people, but it doesn't mean that you can't find a junior role. I recommend looking at startups. Might be more flexible, and at the same time, it allows you to get a broader set of experience. So I think that just really all around, product managers tend to be very entrepreneurial. So starting in a startup just makes a lot of sense. So there's a lot of questions. I put stars next to everything. So how do I like to divide my product team, and how much responsibility does each product manager have in terms of problem statement, influence, and flexibility? So I think there's a couple of ways to think about it. I mean, you can divide your products or your product portfolio by problems they're resolving, so that product managers are focusing on different problems to resolve. I think like at Mozilla, we're for example, 40 product managers. I have one product manager who's reporting to me and one who's working on the same product with me to help me out. And so as an example, I own accounts, syncing in the cloud infrastructure, billing and payments. So I have a colleague who's helping me on the account system, pushing the billing and payments forward, because that's like a specialty in itself and you should be focused on it. I'm focusing on accounts, the backend platform and the cloud infrastructure, while I delegated and hired someone to help me with everything that's related to syncing and integrating sync in as many products as possible, because it's really closely related to accounts. But at the same time, it's a different technology stack. It's resolving a different problem. Accounts leads to like 20 different products, whereas sync is just one product. So having someone focus on resolving the problem space of syncing versus authentication is actually very different. So for me, it felt natural to split those off. As a manager who manages other product managers, it's important that you try to have a portfolio that is cohesive and that is related to one another, so that you're managing like an entire team. There's no one feels excluded. You can align strategies better, and like have a bit larger impact as a team rather than just individually each doing your own thing. feel free to interrupt me if you need me to dig in on anything. I just want to make sure that I'm not just reading through an exhaustive list of questions. So use the chat. Feel free to interrupt me to dig in more. I'll be happy.
Sure, Alex.
Pardon me?
No, go ahead. We will be interrupting you.
Sounds good. Forgive me, like it's some of the questions are longer, and I have to like reread them to gain the full context. So one of the questions is more entrepreneurial. It says, "Dear Alex, you have over 10 years of experience in working with tech startups. I'm currently working on the prototype for my own tech startup, which is a social networking app. My goal from the prototype is to get user feedback and eventually use this feedback as support when reaching out to potential investors. I'd like to know about your experience when it comes to investors for early stage startups. What are they looking for in terms of market validation in particular? Thank you, Andreas." So I think that it's not just getting user feedback. I think you need to demonstrate that you not only have product market fit, but product market channel fit. And what does that mean? I mean, product market fit is clearly, you have users who are interested in your product and are being retained and are engaged with it regularly. And it's important that you have metrics to demonstrate this. Where does the channel fit come into play? Channel is really about understanding whether or not you have a sustainable business model or you can scale this. So for example, if it costs you, $10 to get somebody to your download page, and then only 20% convert to an account, and you have X number percentage, we're looking at more than $100 to acquire a user. And I'm just taking some round numbers here to make the math simple. The channel fit is, do you have capabilities also acquiring users so that this can become profitable? So it's like your cost of acquisition for a customer versus its lifetime value. You don't necessarily, not all investors are looking for that, but I think it's important to have a plan or demonstrate that there's room to grow there. I think that if I'll speak from experience, I've struggled with one of my startups where actually it was more of the opposite. I had no problem acquiring users, but I had trouble fully monetizing them. So I was really running at a loss. And this was far before there was a healthy VC and investor network in the city where I was growing up. You need to position yourself in the market when you talk to VCs. You need to have the supporting data. It's not just user feedback. User feedback will definitely help, but you need that combination of qualitative and quantitative data. Okay, I see more questions coming in. I'll get to that in a moment. All right. So one of these, I love this 4-word question: preparing for PM interviews. So, I mean, obviously you need to have, how to put this? You have to have, I personally hire also, not just for skills, but a certain mindset. But I'll walk you through how I do interviews or I prepare for them. What you'll realize, first of all, you can find online a lot of the most common questions. It also may be useful to apply an interview with companies that you maybe have no interest in interviewing with. if we think that a good product manager is data-driven and runs regular experiments and doesn't make assumptions, take that approach to your interviewing. Run experiments. See how interviews play out, what questions you get asked. Document these questions, and then take time to prepare your answers for future interviews. If you practice enough times, and you see what your strengths and weaknesses are, you can better prepare for companies where you're really interested in working for. So the first times I went out, I'm Canadian. I lived in Montreal. The first time I went out to California for interviews, I didn't land a single job. And then I ultimately spent my 5-hour flight on the way home writing down every question that I'd been asked, really properly thinking about how I should be answering them. And it doesn't change my skill set, it doesn't change my knowledge, but sometimes being hesitant in an interview isn't great. So the second time I went out, all the companies I interviewed for made me offers. I was the exact same person, but it just helped to get it helped to think about the answers beforehand. There's a question that comes back regularly. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? We always feel awkward answering them, but taking time to think about those beforehand will usually yield better results. Sorry, I have a very flickery screen that occasionally turns off, so I'll grab one of the questions from the chat here. Some of the companies expect their PMs to work only on release train and with development teams on roadmap for a year. Some work such as finding TAM, SOM, SAM, OKR, DCM, persona, pain points, and assessing market segments. Delegated product marketing PM. Moreover, I'm trying to read through this question. Moreover, now the UX UI prototypes are handled by design teams. In this chaos, how do you recommend a PM to choose tasks which defines his or her role as PM? So I think it depends on the company you're working for. I know that I've rarely had a product marketing manager, so I do at Mozilla. So if you're working for a startup, you don't necessarily have the luxury of a data scientist. You don't necessarily have the luxury of a product marketing manager. This is where I initially said you can gain a lot of experience in product management starting with a startup, because your resources are finite, and much more so than a larger company. And if a good product manager is T-shaped and it has multiple skills, you're forced into developing multiple skills in the startup. So I think that what you delegate and what you cover will depend on your team's composition. If you have, like in my case, I have UX, I have data science, I have a program manager. A lot of startups expect you to be like the project manager and the product manager. I think that it allows you, if you have a team that has all of these roles covered, it's probably because you have a very large product. And it's important to go and take the time to get consensus between not consensus, but to capture the information from everybody. It means that you have multiple experts, and you need to make decisions based off of all the data and everything that's being provided to you. So if the market research is provided by your product marketing manager, you need to figure out how that influences your strategy, how that influences your roadmap and your prioritization. If you have someone who specializes in UX and wireframing and prototyping, well, that's probably a good thing, unless that's your background. But it's taking this, and they should be doing that based off of requirements that you wrote, based off of how you've defined the product that you plan on building. I think that at the base, the product manager is working on a high-level roadmap, is working on a product strategy and positioning in the market based off of what's been provided, based off of all the information you've gathered with the help of your teammates. I think that you're writing requirements for features that are going to be made and are prioritizing those on day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, even quarterly. Product manager will very often write OKRs. I try to do them in collaboration. I don't think that there's a winning formula for how you divide things. I think that the biggest challenge is it's dividing it based off of what resources you have. The product manager often tends to pick up the responsibilities of any missing role. So in startups in the past, I've been the product manager, but the project manager also, and I've done the entire role of the product manager, but then at the end did most of the analysis because I never had the luxury of a data scientist. I have some colleagues who they would have probably done the design work too. Personally, I'm not a very good designer. I can make wireframes, no problem. But yeah, it's just not my thing. So that's that. Let me see here. So there's two questions that are really similar. Somebody asked probably three questions together, but I'm going to cherry pick a little bit. How do you measure your impact and success in your features? There's how do you feel product management will evolve in the future? How can I measure success for my product? I'm gonna kind of cherry pick some of these questions here for measuring your personal impact and measuring the success of your product. And I think that ultimately, a product manager doesn't. If we look at engineers, it's really easy to quantify their work. We can see what they're shipping. We can do the same thing with UX. Their output tends to be a lot more tangible. Whereas a product manager increases the productivity and the impact of its team. So it's important to understand, how do you measure your impact and success in your features? If my features and the things we're shipping are successful, that means that, first of all, we made the right observations, we identified the right problems, we scoped the right solution. Actually, when we developed our hypotheses and identified our success metrics, we actually identified the right things to measure. All of these things need to happen. And those are all very much related to product management. So I believe that if a product manager should measure its own success, their own success based off of the success of their team. If the team is failing, I think that the product manager has a lot of responsibility there. It tends to be, actually, it can be a leadership role, and I can maybe elaborate that in a moment. And so measuring the success of your product. And so if your success is tied to the success of your product, what does that look like? And well, to be honest, every product is different. So I'll take some really basic examples. If you're a social media site, let's take a generic Facebook, the success of the product could be what the engagement rate is. How often are people using it per month? And I think in the case of Facebook, their engagement rate is 0.55, which means people use it a little bit more than every 2 days. And it'd be easy to think, oh, well, I have point one, people use my product every 10 days, so I'm less successful. But it depends what your product is. If you're an Airbnb and you're not going to get people to book apartments or bedrooms twice a month, if you get them to book twice a year, that might be success for you. If you're a VPN, it might be more of a set and forget. User sets up their VPN, turn it on, and they might not think about it for months. And so the metrics will be really different. So measuring success for your product really comes down to understanding what your product is, what the behavior for your product is, how people use it. And I think that what does success look like for you and for your users? So there's many financial apps that, for example, help you with saving, and they make saving really easy so you don't have to think about it. Well, if you don't have to think about it, you don't have to engage with the product, and they're just collecting your money and investing it, the definition of successful product and measuring that success is going to be very, very different, because it's a set and forget. So yeah, I hope that answers. It's really not a universal answer to that. I'm just reading one of the questions here. How to transition to deep tech, like AI and machine learning driven products, or products heavy on tech. So this is from the chat. I'm going to go a little bit back and forth here. I don't have tremendous experience in AI and machine learning, but I know that if I wanted to apply for any role where that was important, I'd spend a lot of time reading about it and learning about it beforehand. I think that all of your product management skills are useful, but you have to have some level of domain knowledge regarding the industry and the product that you're building. So it's also important that, like, machine learning and AI, they can be buzzwords. They're not a silver bullet to resolve and make all products great. So it's also really understanding when those can benefit the user and your product, and when you don't need to do that. So that's I don't know if that answers the question, but I really forget the AI and machine learning. Like, if you're going to apply for a job with Amazon to work on AWS and something very specific, take time to be familiar with it, prepare yourself for your interviews. I mean, there's it's recently I thought I was going to have to work on something related to AI machine learning, so I dived into a whole bunch of online courses, understood the differences, all the different ways of doing machine learning. By no means am I an expert, but it gives me at least a foundation to have a productive conversation with engineering and to determine from a product management standpoint where it can help make a product experience better. Let me just see here. There's a question around how to make an efficient and successful product roadmap. This one's hits close to home a little bit. And I speak to a lot of product managers where leadership or managers will ask them to really lay out every single feature that they're building and put them in a roadmap. At the same time, they're asked to be agile, to write OKRs. These are all contradictory. A roadmap should be a list of themes, actually maybe more specifically, outcomes you want to achieve or problems you want to resolve. If you know what problem you want to resolve, there should be a measurable outcome there. And that means if you lay these out in a roadmap, I want to make login easier for users at this point. I want to resolve crashes for users. Those are like high-level problems you want to resolve with measurable outcomes, but it stays away from exactly how you'll do it. The benefit of this is that you're embracing a certain level of uncertainty. It gives you a little bit of flexibility to adjust your tactics. If you identify new opportunities to have a higher impact for resolving that problem, you can jump on it. If you write a specific feature into your roadmap, you will lock yourself in. You won't have you'll end up doing waterfall development with your team. You won't be able to pivot. And if you identify a better opportunity, it'll be hard to jump on it because you'll have committed to a specific feature rather than resolving a specific problem. Now, let's not kid ourselves. If here we are, November 20th, and let's just say you do quarterly planning or your road mapping is done quarterly, and you know what problems you want to resolve next quarter, which starts in January. You should probably start to have a really good idea of what features or tactics you're going to do to resolve these problems. So in the short term, you should more concretely know how you're going to resolve and execute on your roadmap. And you should be communicating that with your stakeholders. But past that, it's kind of normal that you don't have that fully fleshed out. So long as you understand the problems that your users are facing and your product is facing, and when you might want to resolve them, and high level how. The other benefit of planning at a more strategic level like this is that it makes it easier to align roadmaps with other product managers. If you're very specific about features in your roadmap and you start to compare two different roadmaps, it's unclear how they line up and support each other. If you're both looking to improve registration or onboarding, then it makes it a lot easier to have that conversation and align efforts so that two teams can have the most impact. There's actually, I so happen to have this, I think I talked about this in my last webinar with Pragmatic Product, but there's this really good book on product roadmaps relaunched, and it kind of shows the pitfalls of what most people are asked in terms of what people are asked to do for product road mapping versus what they should be doing. So it's a good read. I recommend that. Let me just see, there's more questions that came in here. How to handle a situation in a startup when the PM doesn't have the autonomy to implement your idea fully, but all the liability still lies with product manager? It's a good question. I mean, that ends up could potentially be different things. It could just be, internal politics, but it could also be a lack of communication. So if you had, we just talked about roadmaps, a clear roadmap about the problems you want to resolve. If you have some amount of supporting data, I think you earn that trust and that autonomy to implement your ideas. The liability, you're always liable as a product manager, at least you and your team. If you break something or you regress something, it's up to you to resolve it. Nobody else will do it for you. But I think you need to earn that trust. And if somebody is asking you to build something, it should be your job to ask why. What outcome do you think it's going to have? What supporting data you may have to support that hypothesis? Because ultimately, if you're blindly doing everything that you're told, then you're not doing a product manager's job either. It should be your role to push back, or go get supporting information. There's just generally overall, if we take like the most fundamental basic ways to prioritize in product management, whether to do work or not. Forgive me if I'm sniffling. I have a cold. My toddler keeps bringing back colds from daycare, so it feels like I'm always a little sick. So the most fundamental ways for someone to prioritize is, looking at what reach a feature is going to have, how many people are going to get exposed to it, what impact will this have on the users or on a given KPI, how confident are you it's going to actually have that impact, the ease at which how easy will it be to do this work, and there's a kind of a wild card of like, how does this support company strategy? So if your boss is telling you to do something, he might think it supports company strategy, but you should ask yourselves, like, is this reaching a lot of people? What type of impact will it have? And I think one of the bigger things there, that's the biggest wild card, is how confident are you in what he's asking you to do? How confident is he in what he's asking you to do? And if you have a low level of confidence, it may be just a matter of you doing additional research, prototyping and doing an A/B test, running a user survey, doing user testing. Build up that confidence before investing heavily in that work, because you will be liable. So make sure that you're successful, or that if you fail quickly. I hope that answers. What is the biggest challenge I face as a product manager at Mozilla? Just a few, so it's almost harder to how to pick. I think when I joined the product management org, we were 5 or 6 product managers, and we're now over 40 of us. The product org was really young, so I think one of the challenges has been scaling, because I don't think we've necessarily standardized our practices, which at the same time I'm not sure it should be done, but yeah, there's some growing pains in the product management org, I think, but it's a healthy thing. I think it's great to see the company being more product driven, which means they're more user driven and a little less engineering driven. So it's a good problem to have, but still something we need to sort out. I think that what the second problem I had, I'll give as an example. When I initially joined, I was hired to do mobile growth. And to do growth, you have to be very experiment and data driven. And I'm unsure how this never came up in any interviews, but I remember one of my first weeks, I was like, okay, so what tools do we have to A/B test? Where can I dive in and do some analysis of user behavior? There were no tools, there was no data, because it was against Mozilla's policy. They felt that measuring was tracking, that users needed to consent to be part of an experiment, which at the same time, that'll bias your experiment. If you're putting a consent form in the middle of a download page, you've automatically skewed your results for that experiment. So it really, it was a matter of finding a balance between doing proper product management, efficiently measuring, while sticking to the company's values of respecting users' privacies. So we're very focused on anonymizing our data and only measuring what we need to measure. And we stop measuring if we don't need that data anymore. So we're trying to be very respectful as much as possible to our users. I don't necessarily need to know what your email address is. I just need to know what your behavior is. Is knowing the country sufficient enough, or is knowing the city really what you need? So so ultimately that was one of my biggest challenges for the first year. Was I actually couldn't easily do growth and experimentation right out of the gates. I had to do some change management. I feel like there was a third thing I wanted to cover, but that last one is probably one of the biggest challenges, and something we still continuously face. It's that balancing the culture with what helps to make a successful product, because ultimately, if we want to protect people online and we want to have their privacy respected online, we need to know how to use our product, or we won't be able to help them. So it's this weird balance. You need to know how people behave in order to help them and protect them. Obviously, that's where your values come in. Just because I'm measuring you, I mean, what do I do with that data? When do I get rid of it? We're trying to protect people from companies who not only capture their data, but resell it and redistribute it and do a whole bunch of things. Never would we ever do such a thing, and that's part of our values. In fact, once we've captured it and we've done our analysis, do we still need to hold on to that data? Is there any risk in keeping it? So I think that's how we showing what was a challenge, and we turned it into not necessarily an opportunity, well, maybe an opportunity, a way for us to do things our own way and potentially lead by example. I'm just trying to balance between the chat and those who submitted questions beforehand. Somebody asked, I want to shift to product management. I have no technical programming background. So I don't think you have to be an engineer, but if you're going to work as a product manager in software, you have to at least have a good understanding of the tech stack. If you want to have constructive conversations and with your engineering teams, you need to know what they're talking about. There can be benefits of as a somewhat non-technical product manager. I mean, I've been in tech startups for almost 15 years. I am technical now, and probably far more than almost everyone I know in my circle of friends. But I'm nowhere near as technical as the engineers in my team, and it actually does provide some benefits. Product managers should not be telling engineers and engineering managers how to build the product. They should be telling them what to build, what problem they're resolving, how we're gonna measure the outcome. If you're coming from engineering and you're becoming a product manager and you're formerly an engineer, it's really hard to get to shake that habit. An engineer is always thinking about how to resolve the problem, but that's not their job. So a non-technical product manager does have that benefit, but at the same time, if you don't understand what your engineering team is telling you, and they're giving you estimates that you have no idea whether they're accurate or not, and you're not familiar with the stack that the team is working with, then it'll be hard to earn their trust. So thankfully, you can learn really anything nowadays online. So you can it doesn't mean you have to go back to school. It just means that you do an online coding school, for example. If you're a technical product manager in software, there are plenty of product managers in manufacturing and in other sectors too. What is one of my biggest achievements as a product manager? I think what I might be most proud of is what I talked about earlier in terms of helping shift my contribution to helping shift the culture at Mozilla from that first day when I joined to where we are today, where everyone in marketing is experimenting and measuring. Everyone in product is experimenting and measuring. When we think back 4 years ago, that wasn't even perceived in a positive way. So I'm really proud of that, but that's not entirely product management. I mean, I had to demonstrate value and kind of lead by example there. I think that I come from mostly growth, so I think what a lot of my favorite achievements have to do with experiments that had really positive results, or heck, sometimes it's not even necessarily one experiment, but a succession of things. So you might fail in an A/B test, but you'll learn something, and then you follow up with those learnings on another experiment and iteratively get there. This year, I grew my user base by, I'm going to take a round number here, 25 to 30%, something like that. There's no silver bullet. It's just being, identifying opportunities, learning, taking your learnings, developing on the next opportunity, and just that the overall outcome is probably what I consider to be the types of achievements that I become really proud of. So product managers could be working in different domains. What are the qualities that you look for when hiring a product manager who is new in a particular domain? I think that's really the growth mindset. Growth mindset, like you're comfortable with failure and you're able to learn from it quickly. You don't feel like you're comfortable with not being the expert or the lead at first. So if somebody has a growth mindset and is willing to is able to experiment quickly, learn quickly, and take those learnings, then they don't necessarily have to be entirely a domain expert. But if they have also that intellectual curiosity, that you're confident that they're going to go and quickly become that expert, then that's great too. I think there's a great example here. Joining a team as a product manager when you are not a specialist is actually potentially similar to if you're a junior product manager versus a senior product manager. So I've been with the same engineering teams for 3 years. I feel that I have a leadership role within the team, with formulating the strategy and our product roadmaps and our OKRs, and everyone turns to me to help resolve open questions around how things should behave or how we should be measuring things. When I joined the team, even if I was a senior person, I had no expertise in this domain. So I had not a leadership role, but a supporting role. I was trying to make sure that everyone is listened to, everyone is contributing to the roadmap. It's a little bit more consensus driven rather than leadership role. You're there, you have to acknowledge that everyone is more of an expert than you are. And so that role will, that'll evolve over time. So even as a product manager, depending on how new you are to a team, or how new you are in your career, or how well this particular line of work, your role, you have to adapt, and you have to respect that people may know more than you on your team. Even today, I've been with the team for a really long time, but there are technical experts in my team that I will turn to regularly to solicit their advice and get their expertise, and help me make better decisions. I realize we have 5 minutes left. I don't know if, meanwhile, I think I have like 50 more questions that I haven't answered. I don't know how we want to use these last 5 minutes. Let's see if I can find like something that's very different. What is my future career path? I wish I had a clear view of that. I recently went to a conference, I think about a week or two ago, hosted by Gibson Biddle. Gibson Biddle used to be the former VP of product at Netflix. And it was about product managing your product management career. A lot of what we do to make a product successful is we have to do for ourselves. And to kind of have a roadmap, we need to position ourselves in the market and differentiate ourselves. Sometimes there's difficult decisions. Do I want to find a job close to home, or am I open to going elsewhere? And so you can actually do experimentation. You can actually run experiments on your own career. And while I'm not 100% sure where I want to go next, I'm trying to think of myself as a product that I need to market, and I need to figure out, do I want to continue and focus on managing other product managers, or do I want to think about being more of a product lead on a product portfolio? And some companies might try to merge that. I think it's actually really challenging. If you're managing many people, you're focused on the success of your product managers, whereas if you're the lead for a product portfolio, you're really thinking more on the success of your products and that product's portfolio. And there's only so many meetings you can sit in during the week, and finding that balance is not always obvious. So I'm also trying to figure out, do I want to continue down that path of managing more and more people, or do I want to manage more and more products and think of it more from a higher level strategy, and perhaps get a little bit less in the weeds? But it's a great question, because I actually want to share that I'm not really sure what's next for me, and sometimes it's not always clear from a product standpoint what's next. And I think that you should all think of your careers the same way as you think of your products. Experiment, measure, iterate, position yourself, differentiate yourself, know your strengths and your weaknesses. So I hope that left you with something a little bit different. I think that's it. We're almost at time here. I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Thanks for conducting such an insightful session with Pragmatic Leaders, Alex. So I'm sure everyone would have some concrete takeaways from the session.
I hope so. It's one of the challenges of having so many questions to go through. We can't necessarily deep dive on all of them, but I hope it gives you food for thought, and at least points you in the right direction to do a deeper dive. And you can see that a lot of it is contextual. There's rarely a silver bullet.
Lastly, I would like to thank all the participants for sparing their 1 hour with us. And so, guys, we'll be sharing this recording of our session on our YouTube channel. I am sharing the link of our Slack community and YouTube channel in the chat section, so you all can subscribe to our channel and don't forget to join our Slack community.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation. I was blown away when I saw how many questions there were. I really love this participation, and clearly we can almost have a follow-up to answer the other half of the questions.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much for your time.